December 17, 1944, a bone-chilling mist clung to the pine forests of the Ardennes. Its 700 horsepower Maybach engine was silent, not from mechanical failure or enemy fire, but from a more mundane. All around him, the vanguard of Hitler's last great offensive in the West, Kampfrop Peiper, sat paralyzed. The massive Ardennes offensive, codenamed Wacht am Rhein, Watch on the Rhine, was barely 30 hours old, and its sharpest spearhead was already blunted. Peiper's driver, Unterscharfer Erich Weber, had tried everything. The main fuel gauge read empty. The reserve tank was dry. Peiper's battle group had been allocated just 31,000 gallons for the initial push. They had already burned through 40% of their supply to cover just 20 miles. The Meuse River, their first major objective, lay 45 miles further on. Then, through the dissipating fog, a miracle appeared. And there, stacked in neat pyramids 3 meters high, stretching for 200 meters along the roadside, were thousands of American jerrycans. Peiper's adjutant, Hans Gruller, pried one open. The smell was unmistakable. High-octane gasoline. Peiper's men fell upon the depot with the fervor of the starving. They had captured approximately 50,000 gallons more than the monthly allocation for an entire German panzer division on the Eastern Front. It was enough, Peiper calculated, to reach the Meuse and perhaps beyond. The Americans had not even attempted to destroy this cache. This moment of revelation at Honsfeld was the culmination of a logistical war Germany had already lost. To understand its full impact, we must rewind 6 months. The Allied strategic bombing campaign, Operation Point Blank, had systematically targeted Germany's synthetic fuel plants, the vast hydrogenation facilities at Luna, Politz, and Bleckema, which converted coal into liquid fuel, were operating at less than 10% capacity. Germany's total fuel production, including meager supplies from captured Romanian fields, had plummeted to just 33 million barrels for the entire year of 1944. The contrast with the United States was not merely staggering, it was existential. That same year, America produced 1.8 billion barrels of crude oil. The state of Texas alone produced more petroleum than the entire Axis empire. The German war machine was running on fumes, while the American one was drowning in plenty. The Luftwaffe was forced to ground entire squadrons for lack of aviation fuel, cutting pilot training to a suicidal 60 hours. The Wehrmacht conducted maneuvers with horses and carts. Meanwhile, American factories were experimenting with new petroleum-based plastics and chemicals simply because they had a surplus of crude oil. The German High Command knew they could never provide the fuel for a prolonged offensive. The entire operation was a desperate, all-or-nothing gamble. Hitler himself allocated 5 million gallons for the offensive, though only half of that ever reached the front due to transportation chaos. The commanders in the field, like Peiper, were told in no uncertain terms, "You will have enough fuel to reach the Meuse if you capture American supplies." The American system they were up against was a logistical masterpiece, a testament to a nation that had mastered mass production and distribution. While Peiper's men counted individual jerrycans, the Americans had built an entire infrastructure dedicated to moving oceans of fuel. The famous Red Ball Express, a non-stop truck convoy system employing nearly 6,000 vehicles, roared round the clock, delivering over 12,000 tons of supplies per day to the front. The operation itself was a massive fuel consumer, with each truck burning 40 gallons daily, a quantity that would have made a German logistics officer weep. More impressive still was Operation Pluto Pipeline under the ocean. From there, a continent-spanning network of pipelines, built by the U.S. Army's Pipeline and Service Command, extended inland. The major system pipeline ran from Cherbourg to Paris, delivering 800,000 gallons daily. By December 1944, Allied forces in northwest Europe were consuming 7.5 million gallons of fuel per day, and their supply system was delivering 8.2 million. They were not just sustaining their armies, they were building reserves during a massive offensive. After leaving Honsfeld, Peiper's battle group pushed on, capturing the town of But as his lead Panther tanks approached the town on December 18th, they were met with a sight that would haunt them forever, a pillar of black smoke so vast it blotted out the sun. Captain John Brewster, of the 291st Engineer Combat Battalion, had received the warning. His orders were simple: deny the fuel to the enemy at all costs. At 4:30 p.m., Technical Sergeant Paul Solis threw a white phosphorus grenade. The resulting explosion was sonic. A wall of fire shot hundreds of feet into the air. 2 million gallons of gasoline, 4 times the entire initial allocation for Peiper's battle group, transformed into a firestorm that would rage for 3 days. He later told his subordinates, "They can afford to burn 2 million gallons to deny them to us. What are we doing here?" Stavelot was not an anomaly. Across the Ardennes the same scene played out. American engineers, following a scorched earth policy for fuel, destroyed over 8 million gallons during the first week of the battle. They were burning more fuel in days than the German army had been given for its last great offensive. This was a level of strategic wealth that shattered the German soldiers' worldview. A captured German lieutenant later told his interrogators, "Your soldiers throw away chocolate. My men haven't seen chocolate in 2 years. You burn millions of gallons. We measure by the liter. How can we fight such abundance?" The final act for Kampfgruppe Peiper was a slow, agonizing death by fuel starvation. By December 21st, the unit was surrounded at the village of La Glaise. Their tanks, the mighty Tigers and Panthers, were now static pillboxes dug into the streets and gardens. They had run out of fuel to maneuver, to attack, or to retreat. Peiper consolidated the last dregs of fuel, perhaps 1,000 gallons, scavenged from damaged vehicles, but it was useless. On Christmas Eve, under the cover of darkness, Peiper gave the order to destroy his remaining 39 tanks and heavy weapons. The crews placed explosives in the engines and transmissions of machines worth millions of Reichsmarks. The sound of the detonations echoed through the valley. Then, Peiper and about 800 of his surviving men abandoned their vehicles and escaped on foot, slipping through American lines in small groups, leaving their equipment and their wounded behind. The aftermath of the battle revealed the full scope of the logistical chasm. While German units had been immobilized for lack of a few thousand gallons, the American response to the crisis was a further display of their awesome logistical power. When the 101st Airborne Division was surrounded at Bastogne, the U.S. Army Air Forces flew in supplies. On a single day, December 23rd, C-47 transports made 316 sorties, delivering, among other things, 160,000 gallons of fuel to the besieged garrison. They were airlifting more gasoline to one surrounded division than Peiper's entire battle group had possessed at its peak. General George Patton's famed relief of Bastogne, which required his entire Third Army to disengage from one front, pivot 90 degrees, and attack north in brutal winter conditions, was a logistical nightmare. The redeployment consumed 350,000 gallons of fuel in just 3 days. In operation the German High Command would have considered utterly impossible. The psychological impact on the German military was profound and lasting. Letters home from soldiers in the Ardennes, though censored, spoke of a new kind of shock. It wasn't the American artillery or tanks that broke their spirit. It was the evidence of their limitless supply. A German sergeant wrote, "We always knew your production numbers from propaganda, but seeing it with our own eyes, seeing soldiers waste more than we possessed, made it real. Every German who saw your casual abundance knew the war was hopeless." The Battle of the Bulge was the last, convulsive effort of the German war machine. It failed for many reasons: stubborn American resistance, poor German planning, and the eventual clearing skies that allowed Allied air power to dominate. But at its core, it failed because of fuel. The offensive consumed approximately 2.8 million gallons, mostly from captured stocks. During the same period, American forces in the European theater consumed over 267 million gallons. The ratio was nearly 100 to 1. Joachim Peiper's discovery at Honsfeld was a microcosm of the entire war. He found what he thought was salvation, only to learn it was a mere drop in the American ocean. The sight of the burning fuel at Stavelot was the moment the illusion shattered. The war had not been lost in the frozen fields of the Ardennes, but in the oil fields of Texas and the refineries of Pennsylvania, in the shipyards that built tankers and the minds of engineers who designed pipelines. It was a war won by the relentless, undeniable power of logistics, proving that in the industrial age, the army that moves, fuels, and supplies itself best, wins. The empty fuel gauge on Peiper's Tiger tank in Honsfeld wasn't just a mechanical reading. It was the final verdict on the Third Reich.